The Galactic Shaman Astrologers are meeting on May 3rd of 2020, and our topic for today is the end of an age. So I wrote a blog today at galacticshamanastrologers.net, and I would encourage people to read my blog. My blog is meant to be very triggering. It's meant to have a deeper look at humanity and what might be coming for us. I also want to say that the participants in this group may not agree with me in any way, and that I tend to act like Uranus conjunct Isis in my first house. I intend to be a rebel. I might not even believe myself, but I have to really push issues. That's my job. So if we are at the end of an age, what I would like the Galactic Shaman Astrologers to talk about is, we made a video called How Will the Age of Pisces End? It was something like that. And we were talking about the age of Pisces. So you can refer back to that video if you like. But we acknowledged at that time, and we really sorted through, how is it that Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces? And how is it that Jupiter is handing over that space to Saturn right now? And particularly because at the end of the year, Jupiter and Saturn will conjoin at 0 degrees Aquarius, which I think is like the handshake of Jupiter in a fall right now for the end of the Piscean age, and the end of gluttony and Capricorn is going to be handing over the lordship to Saturn. So I'm going to need to ask the shaman astrologers, what is Saturn, particularly in Aquarius? What will be expected of us? What is Saturn in terms of a taskmaster, a stern teacher, even the Grim Reaper? Some people call Saturn the Grim Reaper. Liz Green loves Saturn's interpretation as the Grim Reaper with the sky, then the big black cloak. The other thing that I want to let all of our listeners know is that the nodes are about to change. So on May 5th, 2 days from now, we will leave the Cancer Capricorn node, and we will be in the Gemini Sagittarius nodes. So some people might talk about Mercury and Mercury's role, because Mercury's the ruler of Gemini, and the North node will now be in Gemini. Another video I really suggest that you watch that we made was I Am Guilty Too in Anna's Descent, because on May 13th, we will have a Venus retrograde. And during that time, on June 5th, we will have an eclipse at 13 degrees minutes with minutes of Sagittarius, which is the great attractor, which is the feminine magnetic space at the center of our galaxy. So very much the feminine void. And the South node will be there at Sagittarius, indicating perhaps the past, the collective past of the feminine and Jupiter's role in this age of Pisces. Now, this is a lot to digest. It's very astrological. It's really clear in my mind. But what I need the group to do is start to discuss some of these things. Many of the group members also watched Planet of the Humans. You may or may not want to go into that. I think one of the big issues that we have right now is polarization, where everybody's debating and, throwing out everybody else's video right now. There's just massive polarization. So I don't really want to get into like more polarization. That right there, the polarization is what is causing the magma of the darkness of shadow to rise so extremely on the planet. So with that, I'm going to give my analysis of Jupiter, and then I'll let other people jump in. So we're going to start with Jupiter real quick. So Jupiter is abundance and optimism It is the feeling like you are completely held in the hands of God, the big God. Jupiter, as at my ascendant, so I know Jupiter quite well. Jupiter makes you feel like everything is going to turn out beautifully. Jupiter is the optimism and good luck. It's the greater of the benefics. But also Jupiter, which corresponds to Zeus, was a great philanderer. Zeus was known to have sex with whomever he wanted and have tons and tons of offspring. And many of those offspring were cursed and lived horrible lives. So Jupiter is a really interesting character. If you have Jupiter in the 5th house, you can have tons of children. I always say that when I see that in a chart. Oh, you can have tons of children, have as many as you want. But we're changing right now from Jupiter's, philandering nature of abundance and good luck and lots of optimism to Saturn. Okay, and Saturn, I'll let the group talk a little bit about Saturn, but Saturn's a very different flavor if we can believe that we're going into another age and Saturn is the ruler of Aquarius. So Jupiter right now is in Capricorn where it's in a fall. And Capricorn is like literally the knees. And I feel like we will be brought to our knees, actually brought to our knees by Jupiter's work with Pluto this year. Pluto, being the god of death, is basically killing Jupiter. And I think Holly had some of the more details of the Pluto-Jupiter relationship too, and that mythology. So, and no one's on the spot to recall anything, but astrologically, I would say that since December, when Jupiter went into Capricorn, we have seen that end of gluttony. More and more and more and more pieces of the old structures are falling away, to the point where I don't want to go back to any of those old structures. I find that the blessing really is that all of those structures were not serving. So I'm ready to let go of that Jupiter. I'm ready to be responsible as Saturn would ask. So given that introduction, let's see if any of the group want to talk about Jupiter, their current interpretation of Jupiter, where Jupiter is in the sky right now, or anything that's coming to you. Go ahead, group.
I was really taken when you said Jupiter had too many offspring, and with Jupiter being in the fall now and calling towards like responsibility and the gluttony, could we apply that also to children and overpopulation? Because it's really, with Jupiter for me is in the 4th house of home. So it's really the constriction of the home environment for me is that so for us, we do live in a constricted home environment because of where we live. And it's like feeling that it feels like, it's funny because it's a gas planet, right? So it's like the gas being compressed all into like one little space, and you're just like, it can't stay like that. Gas doesn't stay like that. It's not meant to. And so I'm really realizing how close everything is, and how even in the context of like the body and whether your body is able to have children and all these different things, these different themes that come across, and the fertility of the earth and all of this stuff, it's like such compression and stress that there's no space to procreate literally or however. So I'm just reflecting on that as a really important piece of information to absorb, because these are things that I think we need to be really aware of, because obviously they are problems on the planet. And so how will that take us into the future? And perhaps Saturn in Aquarius is disciplining people with the vision to get their act together. I definitely feel like Saturn's like, are you going to get your act together now? For the things that you know that you could do, but you're still putting aside. So it does feel like that Grim Reaper of go and do your tasks, even, yeah, for this sort of futuristic alternative view. There's finally permission and responsibility to do things that you thought wrong before, because that was the patriarchal old system, whereas now it's like no, like use that energy in a really great way for the things that you thought were scorned. Maybe the south node going on the magnetic feminine will really bring that up for all that ancient feminine wisdom, which we can now bring together with the Saturnian discipline. Yeah, just my thoughts.
Anybody else ready to jump in on the gas planet Jupiter being constricted?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I guess I live with a constricted Jupiter. It's part of a grand square in my chart, so it's not unfamiliar to me of feeling a pressure cooker. And I guess what I'm thinking about are how Jupiter and Saturn rule cycles of our maturity, our growth and maturity. So Jupiter being a 12-year cycle, Saturn being a 29 and change type cycle, and the kind of maturation that happens during the expansion and constriction of both of those cycles. And so personally, it's funny now, I'm just kind of connecting the dots about bringing us to our knees. Jupiter in Capricorn for me is in the 11th house. And I guess a few weeks ago, somehow I on Facebook, I caught a Carolyn Mace video, and she was starting a prayer circle. And I like Carolyn Mace because she, she studies mystics, of all religions, and that's kind of my vibe too. I don't prescribe to any singular religion, but I do love the mystical traditions, being the inner quest for connection to all that is. That's how I define mystic. And so she started this prayer circle, and she's also talked years ago how she really wasn't into prayer. And I didn't really grow up in any tradition either, so prayer is so foreign to me. I never understood it as a kid either. I would sit there and be like, okay, please bless my dog and my cat and my mom and my dad. And I'd just be like, why do I even have to say this if you're supposed to know what I'm thinking? But anyway, that's how I was as a kid. I just didn't understand prayer at all. And so Carolyn May speaks so beautifully about it. And now with maturity and experience and my own growth, I've had the experience of profound silence and quietude, and, if you will, meditation, and those practices leading me to deeper places and helping me wrestle with, internal restlessness and the quest for what's it all about. So it's funny that, prayer, I always think about, being on your knees, right? And giving way to an inner poetry, maybe, that can express how you're feeling and how you're connecting. And I still have had just tremendous resistance to doing that. and exploring that realm with her, and as she's doing this prayer circle. So how do I wrap this up neatly? You know, there's something about Capricorn that has us reckon with our own inner authority, our own sense of empowerment, rather than trying to climb all the stairs to get to the top, to be somebody, something. That rat race that we're on, like you said, is all crumbling down, and as it moves into Aquarius, I haven't even gotten there. Anyway, I'm losing my train of thought. But I just think about these cycles of maturity, of expansion and wisdom. And I guess that's how I frame those planets, even though, as we know, growth is uncomfortable. I had tons of, it reminds me of getting growing pains as a kid, and my calves just killing me. So growing pains, maturity, wisdom as well, like really, that's when you're on your knees, you know, you're humble, and through humility there's this chance to let go of everything you thought you to answer the question of what do I really want to do in this life. That creates a ton of anxiety, and for me, it just goes back to the moment. And to me, I guess that's part of Saturn's role too, is that moment where you're scared shitless and you go blank, and you're in the moment. I don't know, it's not really how we typically think of Saturn, but I think that is what Saturn can do. That's what happens when we get really, really scared. We can often just be stopped in our tracks. And for a moment, if we're willing to look, then we can go and dive deep, like Saturn wants us to do. You know, Saturn wants us to dig deep. Jupiter wants us to go out and go big. And they're two really important pieces of our maturation.
Great, Britt. Yeah, that's a great point too. So Saturn is a father, you know, a mature, stern father figure, whereas Jupiter is this wide, philandering father. Okay, Jupiter expands, Saturn restricts. Beautiful. Anybody else? Holly, you want to jump in at this point?
Sure, I'll talk about Jupiter a little bit. I mean, I see Jupiter as that kind of expansive principle that you just mentioned. And I liken that 12-year cycle that Britt alluded to. If you kind of start at Aries, you don't get to a sign that's ruled by Jupiter until you're, 9 signs in, when you're at Sagittarius. So Jupiter kind of goes through all those signs, and it just kind of expands and expands and expands and gets to Sagittarius, where it's its first domicile, which is a sign of kind of cosmic expansiveness. It's the one sign that we have a lot of galactic points that we track. It has both the Great Attractor and the Milky Way galactic center in Sagittarius, which kind of points to the really big picture expansiveness aspect of Jupiter. there's, it also holds the constellation of Sagittarius, which is that, the centaur with the archer that is going to shoot the arrow into projecting itself. So it's very projective too. And Ophiuchus, which is the sign of the water bearer that is wrestling with the great serpent of wisdom and knowledge, and how does it kind of integrate that energy into itself. And then the immediate sign after it's in its domicile is Capricorn, where it falls, because this is a sign of Saturn. And Saturn contracts, and Capricorn is that cardinal earth sign that brings everything back to the fundamentals of reality. It is very different from this cosmically expansive house of the philosophy and truth-seeking of Sagittarius. And so this is a very, it's like extra constrictive place for Jupiter to be. And right now Jupiter is really close to Pluto, which is a planet for me that kind of like creates so much transformation that it really just brings things down to the base level. So here's another point that currently Jupiter in a fall in an earth sign is contacting another planet that when their energies blend, there is both the expansion of transformation, but also this kind of both an implosion or constriction down into its most fundamental parts. And then the emotional part of that, which is this expansion of fear, because Pluto can bring up those fear feelings. So Jupiter here is in one house of Saturn, in being contained, learning some of Saturn's constraint, and then we'll move into its next house, which is Aquarius, which is air. Air is fixed air, more expansive, before it gets to its final house that it's the domicile lord of, which is Pisces, which is mutable water. And I think that the transit of Jupiter through Capricorn and Aquarius tells us a lot about Saturn's maturation process, where you go through physical hardships and it helps bring about a maturing of the mind, and such that once Jupiter gets to its other domicile home, Pisces, there is kind of an emotional amalgamation of those experiences. And then it gets rebirthed into Aries as Jupiter transits around the zodiac again. But again, to go through all those stages before it gets back to its home in Sagittarius. So Saturn is like that, it's constrictive, but it's maturation. And it is a different practical kind of wisdom. Whereas Jupiter is that cosmic connection to the source and all the possibilities. Saturn is, how is that really going to apply in practical, workable, responsible ways going forward? So, as they do that handoff shake when they conjunct, it's a little bit of, all right, you've had big dreams and you've had a lot of fun, but you can't do it all. So what of those dreams and inventions are you going to really put your energy into? And I love the part about Jupiter being that all father, having all those children in mythology. He was not a hands-on parent. in any shape, form, loads of children, demigods. Not to say that Saturn was a hands-on parent either. He did, but he swallowed his children, and then Jupiter in the mythology, he had to be tricked to regurgitate his siblings and bring them about. But it is where, how do you like really be responsible for those ideas that you bring into manifestation? And how do you have responsibility? And can you, because I think at a certain point, the more benevolent aspects of Saturn as an agricultural god, because there's that aspect. It is not just the Grim Reaper, but there's that aspect too. But that is the agricultural knowledge that life has cycles, and that you do have to be a bit hands-on and nurture things, which is what you learn if you live in a farming agricultural community. You just can't take off and have fun and expect the gardens to grow or the livestock to stay in their pens. You know, that's not how you continue to have good harvests and productivity. And another point to understand Jupiter is that the two signs of Jupiter, Pisces and Sagittarius, are opposite the two domicile homes of Mercury. So that will also tells us a little bit that we can understand Jupiter by understanding the opposite of Mercury, which is that integration of discrete knowledge, data assimilation, which is Gemini, and the use of the hands and practical skills to get things done and to sort through all those discrete particles of data, which is Virgo, or at least my interpretation of Gemini and Virgo. But I'll let other people expand on that.
Okay, wow, that was, so we're covering a lot. Each person has really pulled together different pieces of Jupiter and Saturn. So let me just pull this back together again. So for our viewers, what we're trying to say is that Jupiter is the ruler of what we consider like the previous age, while humanity was maturing. And what we're proposing is that if we look to Saturn as the archetypal lord of the age that is coming, that handoff is important for each of us to really consciously take part in right now. And that is what astrology does. It really kind of sifts through, like Mercury, all of these details and explains to us how to make this transfer of power that is coming on December 20th of 2020 in the Kingmaker conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius, where this handoff happens. Okay, so just to pull a few things together from those three comments. The gas planet Jupiter is what was traveling with the asteroid Wuhan, which I am interpreting as the archetypal force of a virus. And what I've studied so far is that Jupiter and Wuhan were bringing both a blessing and a curse. And as Holly said, kind of like looking into the plutonic potential of your deepest fears and possibly a death and a rebirth. Jupiter is a big gas planet. And what I understand from the doctors and scientists who are my clients, and some of whom who have had either their own beloved die or some of their patients die, is that what we're actually dying of when we die of the Wuhan virus, which is what we should call it during this video, please, is a gas death. Basically, we die of CO2 poisoning. So it's a death by gas. The red blood cells collapse. They actually suffocate from CO2. And Jupiter, who is this big philandering father who was not necessarily looking at his offspring or taking care of them at all, you know, humanity, we are, every time I speak, exhaling that CO2. So I am continually exhaling CO2, and I don't want to get into arguments about climate change or anything like that. But let's just understand that all of the trees on the planet could not possibly inhale the amount of CO2 that I am currently exhaling, or the rest of humanity. It is just not in balance in any way anymore. So it's very interesting to me that we're dying of suffocation of our red blood cells by a gas from potentially the Jupiterian gas planet traveling with Wuhan. My understanding is that the alveoli in the lungs collapse, and the first organ to go is the kidney and the liver, which Jupiter rules. Okay, so there's a little bit more of the medical astrology. Now, Saturn is not such a great father either. I'm not saying anything is going to be all that much better, but Saturn is the ruler of agriculture, and as such, being the lead weight responsibility, because Saturn is lead, not gas, is like really getting grounded down into reality and the cycles of agriculture and nature. And the fact that Ceres is traveling with Medea, and I've written about this in the blogs, and every chart that I run, she's still traveling with Medea. Now, Medea is conjunct my natal sun, so I know Medea quite well. And Medea has to make a choice to kill some of her children to, in her perception, keep them from a more horrible fate. Now, as a gardener, when I'm out there planting my seeds, and I've got my little tool, and I poke that little worm, I have to have this constant relationship of, I am killing the habitat of many worms and bugs right now. I also have to realize that when I'm digging up the earth, I am potentially ruining the lives of moles and grubs and other creatures that would live there. So I'm eating my own children, like Saturn. And like Medea, I am making conscious decisions to do this type of agriculture to keep myself from a more horrible fate. In the case that Ceres and Medea together, traveling together, actually indicate a famine coming, which as an astrologer, I do see that potential, not just from this, but from 10 years of hard science around topsoil and water management, and the productivity of soil that is now completely deleted of any life whatsoever, because it has over 40 years of pesticide application. So we've got some serious things coming up that Saturn is going to need to be responsible about. Agriculture being one of the primary things in my worldview of what Saturn will make us accountable for. So Saturn to me feels like, and actually Britt said this in the group once, like it's time to self-govern. That there's a certain amount of, I don't need the government to manage me. I don't need the law officials to manage me. I don't need big corporations to feed me. That Saturn feels like I've perhaps reached a level of maturity and accountability that I could take care of myself, that I could be responsible. And with that, I feel that the feminine will also be more honored. And let me explain this. The part of Zeus being a great philanderer is that the feminine during that period was the host to his philandering, and all the rape that Zeus performed, and the strength of the patriarchy in not respecting the fertility of the land or the fertility of the feminine is going to subside with this Saturnian responsibility. So I really actually adore Saturn in that way, is that Saturn does not want the land raped. Saturn does not want the feminine earth raped. Saturn wants us to be responsible and accountable. This is what I like about, like Emmeline was saying, that stern father. Like, because I'm now ready to be stern myself and really take responsibility for myself. So let's hear if the group has anything to talk about this before I jump onto another subject. Anyone want to respond to that?
I think it's really interesting in the mythology, just to kind of jump off from that. Saturn, because Saturn is Jupiter's father. I don't know if we clearly stated that, but to just reiterate that if we did. And Rhea is his mother. And at one point, Rhea tells Zeus not to get married because his energy would never be able to be contained in that marriage, and it would create all these other problems. And I think that, you know, you don't really have the mythology of Saturn and Rhea having the same kind of infidelity and stuff that you hear about with Juno and Jupiter throughout time. So I think there is another aspect of this responsibility, is not only that responsibility to your children and what you're creating, but also that responsibility to your partner.
I'm getting a few hits off of Saturn in Aquarius. It's interesting, Holly, that Saturn births Jupiter. Responsibility, groundedness, birth, wisdom. Excuse me. I guess I sort of see what you're saying with, I don't know how long Saturn's going to be in Aquarius, but when I think of Aquarius, I do think of a sign that's a little more distant, very autonomous. Freedom and personal freedom is paramount. Sort of advanced thinking or advanced ideas. I can see, maybe, we'll have innovations in agriculture. I, for one, have been absolutely fascinated by the permaculture people who build food forests that are self-sustaining, sort of. No, they're food forests. Sort of moving in that direction, I don't know, that's going to take a while. But Saturn in Aquarius, yeah, that quest for building inner autonomy and no dependency. I'm losing my train of thought again, but those are the hits that I got with Saturn in Aquarius and that handout over. Jupiter, I guess, will be moving through Aquarius as well first, more, and yeah, I think of Aquarius as not the water bearer, but the consciousness bearer. It's a fixed sign, and in my experience, the fixed signs, while they have a bad rap for being stubborn, that quote unquote stubbornness builds inner authority. It builds a stability within oneself that can't be messed with. For me, that's the ultimate goal for anything fixed, is that it's meant to have you build a backbone, have you get really clear with yourself, which, will be refreshing after all this Gemini stuff that has been ping-ponging us between, so many different ideas and theories and agendas and whatnot. And then Lolita, you're talking about Wuhan, and as an archetype moving, I suppose it will move into Aquarius as well. I don't know how long it's going to travel with those planets, but I can't help but think that Aquarius does bring innovation. It does bring us into the future. It can bring advancement and consciousness.
Yeah, I'll speak about where Wuhan is now. Brett, keep going.
I'm done. I don't have anything relevant to say. So.
Okay, well, before we get too far on, let's know where Wuhan is right now. So the archetypal Wuhan is acting out for the virus in astrology. And you can go to Demetra George's site to see a lot of exact dates about that. Wuhan is actually in Aquarius right now, and it conjoined Saturn, and then it actually moved past Saturn, so that is why so many discussions are being had right now of whether we should open the restaurants again, whether we should open the beaches again. Wuhan has moved past Saturn's restrictive force right now. But what's going to happen, so now I can give the big picture that I was hoping to get to here, with also Mars as an intermediary player this year. Wuhan is going to retrograde back in May, while Venus is retrograde, back to Saturn to be very restricted again. And then actually Jupiter and Saturn are going to retrograde back to Pluto. And Wuhan is going to retrograde back with them. So what's going to happen is we're going to get, like we talked about in I Am Guilty Too, Anonymous Descent, it will come in waves. So we've had the very first itty bit of the wave of the Wuhan archetype. And this corresponds to what the CDC and other scientists are saying about it as well. So right now we're going to get this little potential opening where Saturn is no longer influencing Wuhan. And then Wuhan's going to come back, and it's going to travel exactly with Saturn by the degree and the minute. If you look at July 11th through July 17th, Wuhan and Saturn are together by the minute. Okay, so they are conjoined at that 29 minutes or 29 degrees and so many minutes Capricorn for a very long time. And Jupiter's going to move back too, and Pluto's already retrograde. So we're going to have a massive review of what is required of us to really be responsible and accountable, and to potentially the therapies, the medical therapies that we might learn about, that I've been studying and have a book on, and some of the scientists and doctors that I work with are, pressing me to look into ozone therapy and ultraviolet light therapy and different kinds of therapies like that. So I've read a book on ozone therapy and medical grade ozone only. I'm not talking about get an ozone generator off of Amazon and kill yourself. I'm talking about medical grade oxygen transmitted through a medical grade ozone device. And that is Aquarian air. It is also Aquarian light, because the way I see Aquarius is that it is photonic light, which is a type of air. So it is considered an air sign, but it is actually the water bearer is pouring stars, is pouring light. So it's kind of like air and light. So we might learn from Wuhan some really fabulous new technologies that are a boon to humankind. And right now, I also wrote about Will.I.am Gates, who is the gate to that sovereignty that we're all hoping to achieve. So that everything that is happening right now, if we could stop polarizing and really see it as this massive, perfect package coming forward, I think it will be really assisting human life. And like Britt said, those permaculture forests, you know, so inspiring to get out there and be your totally bizarre, unusual self, making massively weird permaculture forests that aren't like in straight rows with pesticides and herbicides and big, huge tractors, but like magical, wild creativity through your garden, which is so fabulous. And I think that Saturn in Aquarius will promote that type of magical wild gardens with elves and gnomes, and the earth is starting to, like, before you put a shovel in, you talk to her and get her consent and make sure that she's with you on this shovel, and all of those type of really earth-oriented magical ways with the garden. Now, there was one other point that I wanted to say before I open this up again, and that Mars I see as the intermediary here. And don't be afraid when Mars comes through. But what Mars is going to do is it will be in its own sign for 5.5 months. I've been looking at solar return charts all over the place. I got to tell you, it looks really grim. I got to tell you, it looks really grim, folks. Mars is going to make us face our first chakra, safety and security. And please allow that process to happen without necessarily resorting to violence to provide your safety and security. But what Mars will do is when it enters Aries, it will cross Chiron, the wound, and then it will cross Black Moon Lilith, the void. Then it will conjoin Eris, the goddess of discord. Then it will retrograde back and do that again. All the while, it will be squaring the Wuhan, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter that I just spoke about. And when Mars is in its own sign of Aries, that is the ultimate, like, first chakra. I have the right to exist, potentially very selfish, potentially very violent, or potentially very noble, courageous, strong. And we as humanity will decide, which is why I keep, as an astrologer, pointing out, please stop polarizing. Because the more that we polarize now and finger point and blame, when Mars hits Aries, everyone is potentially going to go, well, it's the cabal's fault. And the so-and-so's trying to trap us. And folks, just realize that Mars is doing what it can to bring you to that sovereignty and accountability that Saturn requires of you. So when I say the devil is inside, when I write those posts about the devil is inside, look to your own devil inside rather than pointing the fingers at all of these big representatives of the devil right now. The devil's inside. And if you read my blog today, it's going to be very clear, okay? Because when Mars does this, it's going to retrograde back across the goddess of discord, square to Pluto exactly. Then it's going to go forward across the goddess of discord, square to Pluto exactly, with Saturn and Wuhan. And Saturn and Pluto, by the way, is the limits of power. So they're not the limits of power for the birds and the flowers and the insects and the worms. That's not who the stars are deciphering God's mind for. The limits of power have been reached for humanity, And now we need to restrain and restrict ourselves and be responsible stewards, which is what Saturn wants to give us for the Aquarian age. So if you read my blog, The Aquarian Age, Empty Your Cup, there's an enormous amount of emptying our cup that needs to happen right now. Okay, so let's have folks jump in there.
I was thinking about Jupiter and with the expansion, with the cosmic consciousness, that Holly was using that phrase, really struck a chord with me, because with what you were saying in your blog, Lalita, with Mercury today right opposite the moon, well, the moon today is right opposite, not Mercury, Neptune in Pisces, and the moon is in Virgo opposite that. It's obviously like the illusion of Pisces and that escapist thing. And then Jupiter ruling Pisces being the expansion of that. So it's kind of like all this expansion of going into the cosmos and then bringing it back to what does that look like every day? Like, what does that look like in our life, in my life, grounded in daily reality? And perhaps that will connect well with Mars, when Mars is kind of steering the way really like strongly. This has to happen, this has to be, because with Jupiter being all about breath, there's so much in that, because obviously breath is used in meditation, breath is used in prayer, breath is used to calm the nervous system. And if we can, perhaps it's like understanding how to bring that together, some kind of connection in breath, of bringing everything together. Yeah, and that real sovereignty, because when you're in a state of sovereignty, like when you were saying, Britt, about prayer, you know, and we're kind of like, please God, and you're looking to this other hierarchy to sort of help you, and we're so used to doing that. How is that when we're in a state of being in ourselves, in our root chakra, and sitting on the ground and on the earth, like on the grass, and all it is us? Then who are we when we're breathing? Like, are we breathing in our essence of our truth of who we are, or are we breathing in something else? It's just really interesting for me that I play with it a lot, because having done yoga training and all these things, I'm just realizing that it all comes back to me and what I choose. And it's all kind of, like you said, Lolita, a game. It's all a game of going through these different things, and the illusion and understanding that serves me to come back into my sovereignty. I'm wondering about Mars being quite volcanic for personal sovereignty. Just really getting really like, this is who I am, and having to figure out how to do that in a kind of loving way as well as empowering way, and having ways of figuring it out, because I feel that already coming through, a lot of that fire. They're really hot now.
Yeah, I think Holly said something that I love. If she could talk about that with Jupiter being the ruler of Pisces and Neptune being in Pisces right now. And Neptune is in a fabulous square today to Venus stationing, about to station at Al-Nalam, that white fire of transmutation back to oneness. and opposite of Virgo moon of let's get those details down, please. So the blog was a bit about the last time we had Neptune in Pisces, which was also a new age. So we've had lots and lots of new ages. And the new age in Pisces tends to be the gold rush. Okay, so going for the gold, potentially destroying ecosystems, which we saw in the 1800s when Neptune was in Pisces. Also the kind of the fantasy and potentially the illusion of being in touch with spiritual masters or other metaphysical realms, which is possible and maybe it's illusory. It does unveil those other realms, which is fabulous. But in this current releasing of the Piscean age, I feel that Jupiter's current condition is really offering. I mean, I have seen enormous amounts of people who were channeling the white collective of something or another, who were very politically polarized, but they were channeling the higher council of the white collective of the winged something or another, and they were completely polarized politically. And I'm going, I don't know that the white winged collective of whatever cares one bit about Donald Trump. But, you know, the game of, you know, that they were receiving some higher spiritual truth from the white winged collection of whomever was, you know, like a messiah syndrome of that Piscean perspective. Like there's some messiah who is telling us that this political viewpoint is God's way. Now that's totally the lower part of Pisces. Okay. The more exalted part of Pisces is our willingness to realize that we're all one, and that Donald Trump is me, and that Bill Gates is me, and that the devil is inside. So that for me is the higher perspective of Pisces, that I am the earth, I am the worm is me, I am the breath of the tree. That is the higher, because my North Node is in Pisces, so I've worked this out quite a bit when Neptune crossed my North Node. So maybe Holly can talk a little bit about how Jupiter's fall might actually clear up a lot of this New Age Messiah stuff.
Well, I think right now in Capricorn, we should think about how Jupiter rules Pisces, as I said earlier. And from Capricorn to Pisces is that sextile aspect of, I think, 60 degrees. So it's a supportive aspect. So there is an easy energy flow between Pisces and Capricorn. So I think Jupiter can kind of draw on some energy there, but with Neptune there, which is also a, you know, it's not quite as big as Jupiter, but Neptune isn't one of these giant gas planets. And for me, it's kind of like that energy of the mists and dissolving and coming in and out of reality and illusion and dimensions. So it somewhat feels like it is a energy that kind of drains at Jupiter a little bit to me. And it is this, because this is the place of where the collective consciousness is that one source that Lolita was just talking about, where it all comes together, but that it can sometimes manifest in illusion type ways, or false hope or false optimism. And it can be ungrounded, because Pisces is opposite to Virgo, which is the grounded, practical details of reality, with Pisces being kind of that spiritual, cosmic, almost heavenly place of love in its highest vibrations. So on the one hand, I think that Jupiter can kind of pull in some of that positivity and optimism while it's in its fall, but I also think that this also kind of, you know, it can expand that potential to be deluded about the facts of the moment. And I think that, are you hearing me? Yep. Okay. And I think that with Mars going in retrograde into going into Aries in retrograde, we need to think about that Mars is that fight, flight, fornicate response system of the body. So we have a few ways of if Mars feels pushed to survive, it could fight back, it could run away, it could freeze. And that is in Aries, is that challenging square aspect to Capricorn that Lolita was talking about. And it is also our potential to make it and be strong as we get through a situation that might be difficult. But so I see Neptune in Pisces as part of the drain and the deflation of Jupiter and Capricorn, along with that kind of Pluto conjunction. And I had mentioned also that with this South Node going into Jupiter's other house of Sagittarius, the energy that, which is sometimes the nodal axis, is sometimes called the head and the tail of the dragon, with the North Node being the head and the South Node being the tail. So the energy is going towards the head of the dragon, which will be going into from Cancer into Gemini, with the tail going into Sagittarius. So there is also this kind of energy movement away from that cosmic perspective and into the concrete details that Mercury represents, and kind of the data accumulation and details and diversity of thought that happens in Gemini. And I think in the long term, that's good because it'll be a beautiful trine between the North Node in Gemini, and Saturn will move back into Aquarius at the end of the year, but it's getting there. And there's some challenging circumstances to kind of get through. So I think we are kind of blessed with that Mars in Aries, even though it goes over some difficult points, because that is really going to strengthen, if we allow it to, strengthen our sense of we are going to turn a corner and we are going to be sovereign and we are going to take care of ourselves. But the potential is that we could kind of devolve into some chaos and self-serving activities, and if we as a collective let it. So is there that potential of very high potential of Pisces, of everybody coming together and being cooperative and helpful and everybody getting each other through this. And we've seen some of that. But then there's also that potential of kind of dissolving into individual factions of, I just need to take care of me. So I always like the middle way. And we'll see. Can we go there the middle way? I'm not sure if that answered your question about Neptune and Sagittarius in Pisces. Sorry, Neptune and Pisces, but it is very much related to what's going on with Jupiter and Capricorn, since they're kind of talking to each other. Yeah.
So Holly has a fabulous Gemini ascendant, and I believe the star point is going to be on her ascendant. Yeah. So Venus star point will be conjunct Holly's ascendant. I think that's a major marker also. If you listen to Holly and feel who she is and how she presents, Holly always gives both sides of it really beautifully. Okay, and that is some of that Orion Belt Gemini energy that we're going to have to come to, with the node moving into Gemini, Venus making her star point there, is Alnilam, which is where Venus is right now, before she begins her descent, requires us to come back to that oneness. Stop polarizing. And I love the way Holly can present both sides, and you feel how grounded she is because she's got a Capricorn sun. Really solid feet on the earth in reality. Okay. And I know her solar return also, you know, so I don't want to put anybody super on the spot, but she is really looking into being of service to humankind. She's looking into medical astrology, more and more on astrology. And she presented us all in the group with a YouTube video from Dark Star Astrology on the cardinal sign Saturn, Pluto, or Saturn or Jupiter, Pluto conjunctions in cardinal signs often lead to some kind of massive change in the structures, often which also correspond with an illness or a virus. So Holly is able to present that to us. And the feeling that she gives, where Venus is going to make her star point, is just giving very pertinent information without being polarized about it. That's the way Holly always feels like to me. And I do think that Venus making her star point there is going to really require us to be that way before Mars then goes into his retrograde and everybody potentially goes into chaos 101. Like, how angry and chaotic can it be? But I want to just talk briefly about that video from the Dark Star Astrology on the different viruses throughout time. So I am still getting people sending me videos that aliens created this virus, that so-and-so created this virus. I mean, people are still sending me videos. I can't play them because only basically on Sundays do I even have internet at my house, because I had no internet for 3 days this week because there's just way too much use on my little consolidated communications here in the hills. Anyways, let's look at a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the signs. So Libra, in the 1980s, 81, 82, we had Mars move between the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So look at your ephemeris, 1981, 1982, Mars moved between a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and Mars is an initiator of something. Mars is always going to start the fire. And that's where we saw the virus called AIDS. Now, Libra is around harmonious partnerships. And when you have a Saturn-Pluto conjunction with Mars being the spark for that, we saw AIDS as like, now you're not going to be able to kiss anybody. Now you're not going to be able to have sex safely. And, you know, people will tell me all different things of how AIDS was created. From an astrological perspective, truly it doesn't matter how AIDS was created. It's that we had a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Libra, and whether it came from monkeys or from somebody who distributed it through vaccines, there's all kinds of theories through women prostitutes in Africa. I don't know how. The only thing that matters to me, listen very carefully, is that Saturn and Pluto came together in Libra, with Mars also running through that year. And it sparked some kind of a destructive force. In that way, Saturn made us more responsible. Didn't Saturn? Saturn said, stop having sex with everybody in bathhouses. Now, I'm not against making love. Anyone who has followed me knows that I love making love. But Saturn said at that point, you can't just have sex with everybody now, can you? Saturn made us more responsible. And so what's happening now is Mars was the initiator again. Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto came together, and Mars swiped by Jupiter and Wuhan, smacked into Pluto, and then actually conjoined Saturn at, I think, 0 degrees Aquarius, which is the kingmaker point, and then is moving on to his next stage. And we were told to be very responsible, be extremely responsible. Do not pass your breath, Jupiter, with anyone else. Do not walk into the physical space and breathe on anyone else. And the dark star astrology, which I'm not going to spend an hour and a half on, because her video is enormously long, goes all the way back to the 1500s. So if Bill Gates and whomever Harvard scientist that you want to blame on this virus was also there in the 1500s, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that astrologically, we can see this really clearly as a limit of power and a demand for responsibility. That's what Saturn's doing. Mars acts as the initiator every single time. I don't have an ephemeris for the 1500s, but I'm sure Mars passed through at that point too and said, you all are gonna do some changes here. And then, as Holly said in the group, the plowman became very important again, because so many laborers died actually from those early plagues that the god of agriculture and the plowman became incredibly important again. So if we just look at the history of the plagues, they were always somehow sparked by that limit in power, had been met, usually I think in the cardinal signs, to create some new beginning that humanity would enjoy. I might make a private video about death. I just want to say very briefly that death is the greatest place that you can ever go. So anyone who is terrified of their death, I'll make a video about really experiencing your funeral consciously. And I'm not making light of this. People will leave. People are leaving. And I do have clients who are in deep terror for their life right now in New York City still. And people, 9 out of 10 people who go to the hospital die. So they're actually choosing to stay at home with their partner in their apartment and not go to the hospital. So they are consciously facing their death together, holding hands in bed at night. So I will make a video at some point about how to be conscious in your death. Okay, because that's a very important piece too. But let's hear any reactions to what I've said so far. Comments, feelings.
I think that just to kind of pick up with the square that you talked about today as well, with Neptune and Venus in Gemini and the moon in Virgo, we just should talk about the moon a little bit in Virgo. That is about dispersing and really also understanding the feelings of what's going on. And when I looked, the exact square points are right around the 20 degree mark of each of those signs, 20, 21. And right there is going to be asteroid Diana in Virgo, which is about making that choice to be kind of the mother who protects the forest, but she chooses not to have her own children, which kind of goes with the series themes. She is the huntress, that fierce protectress, who goes and helps the animals and lives joyously in the woods as a kind of like a high priestess to Gaia, and understands the transits of the moon. But Artemis Diana was also one of the great midwife goddesses. She had no children herself, but she helped birth in new things. So there is part of that as well, that there's these birthing pains that are happening, to kind of acknowledge them as not just the falling of, everything coming apart, but they are birthing pains. And birth is one of those great transformational processes that you just don't go back to the way things were before. You can't put the baby back in the womb. And once you have that point, you don't go back. And death is another one of those points. With a few exceptions in history of the mythologies, people don't, that's a one directional process. But there are some other good, interesting stars to note in Gemini, which are also close to Al-Nalam, and one of them is Bellatrix. And I was looking at this today, which is also close to that 20-degree mark. And Bellatrix is sometimes been seen as that evil female energy, but really the higher vibration of that is like the Diana energy, that fierce protectress. So is this reiteration of these two themes of this feminine energy that is kind of like the Amazon, that protects nature, that will protect children, but is choosing not to have more children out of responsibility and out of love, that is resurfacing again in several points along this square today. And thank you for the pointing out my ascendant's like pretty close in there. My Mercury is also in the other side in Sagittarius at about 20 degrees. So I think I'm feeling this a lot, because that for me makes a grand cross all these points. And my natal moon is in Virgo. So I can feel that nitty-gritty details of the material life that this transit of the moon is bringing up, which is, both the pleasures and the pain.
Yeah, I'm going to throw in one more bit. Just to say that I don't take death lightly. A little bit more of my background is that I'm hospice elder care provider and have been for years and years. So I've actually been there for the transition for people. And so for anyone who's listening to this video and thinks of us as just kind of like academically yakking about the new age, I just want you to know that I'm very grounded in that reality of people suffering, and really suffering at this point. The other thing that I see in the sky right now, which is a really powerful square, and help me because I saw this in a solar return for April 27th. I'm trying to get it right, but I think Juno, which is retrograde, who represents Zeus's wife, is in Libra. She's square to Chiron. And let me just figure this out. There was a square this week. I'll have to pull up the chart for April 27th, but Juno herself, representing the wife of the philanderer, is going to be part of the grand square that Mars makes also when it enters Aries, and will square that Juno. And Juno retrograde is this massive review of the womb space and its power to create life. Yoni, or Juno, or the sacred marriage bed, as I know Juno, is under a lot of review right now, like whether we should be using that womb as procreation right now. Square to Chiron, I think pretty exactly right now. Juno's at 8, I think. but you can check it out. Oh, opposition, you're right, Emily, and I see your fingers. But there was something else that was making a square this week, and I can't remember. Oh, it's Lucifer. Okay, that's what it was. Okay, I did this on a solar return this week. So Lucifer has gotten to like 8 degrees. Juno is retrograde at 8 degrees Libra, and Aries, Chiron, is around 8 degrees. So that is also making that really powerful square in the sky right now. And so what I heard today, you know, because I don't watch videos, I can't really get a video to fully load in my current internet situation, but there are people saying that Bill Gates is all for depopulation. Now, of course he is. I'm not denying that. You don't need to send me more videos on this, folks. But it's because he is our shadow that we are not willing to really look into ourselves. All right, so we all have to be able to practice a certain amount of restraint so that this character doesn't have to rise as the depopulation god. He doesn't have to rise as the depopulation god. If I am willing to practice that restraint, and Juno in retrograde in Libra is that questioning of whether I should really bring in another child. My daughters have said to me, both of them, so I'm raising the children who will definitely have to face this because they're of childbearing age. Kachina has said there is no way she's bringing a child in. She can hardly take care of her cat. Okay, like she realizes that her resources are going to be spent more towards other forms of creativity, and she also takes care of adults with autism. So she's ready to take care of adults with autism and help them navigate their world rather than bring in her own offspring. She's making a really conscious choice about that. And 8 degrees Libra happens to be her ascendant. So this square is in, really conjunct her. Yes, same as you, Emily. Yeah, I always think you and Kachina are so similar. Yes, very. The young women are really making decisions right now. Kachina also lives in an apartment where she's trying to even get seeds to germinate. You know, can they even germinate in this little tiny apartment that's very, very dark? So she's looking very strongly at the fact that she's probably likely never going to have children. All right, and not in the foreseeable future. And this is the way the young women are really looking at it now. And I think it's an honest way to look at it. It's not that Bill Gates is trying to depopulate us if Juno takes over her proper authority of her own womb. Okay, and Jupiter is not philandering to just procreate like he likes to. My other daughter, now I hate to say this because my other daughter is like Chundi incarnate, okay? She has a July 11th birthday where the Saturn, Pluto, everything just did its massive stellium lineup, okay? And she can honestly admit that she would not be a good mother at all. Like she really is like, there's no way I could do it. I am not remotely capable of mothering. Both of my girls are really clear, and they don't need to blame anything on Bill Gates. They are taking their own personal responsibility. And I would say that in order for us to stop polarizing, I think Emmeline said this earlier, just look at your own thing, folks. Look at your own thing and be responsible. And then those projected external schizoid realities of the Wedico don't have any influence on us. if we look within to what really needs to happen. All right, so let's hear what people have to say about that.
I would love to say briefly, just I was like, whoa, I couldn't believe that Juno was at 8 degrees on Libra. I wasn't aware it was that close to my ascendant, because I think what is interesting with the whole population and womb thing is that I really feel similarly to Katrina, and it's Katrina, sorry. It's like even yeah, it's like a whole review of how to do that. And when you said, Holly, about Diana, who decides not to have children, and she lives in the woods, and she's a protector for Gaia and for others, and she's like a doula, and she's helping other people raise their children, or she's helping, that for me, perhaps I'm speaking for other people in the sense that feels the most attractive route, because there's so many beautiful children and there's so many needs, that it feels so natural to go and help that. And yeah, so I'm going through personally a lot of womb review. It's really really relevant to me, because I just, yeah, it's really, and then that feels life-giving and exciting. I feel like, that's my freedom. It doesn't feel sad to me. I feel like my womb is very good and reliable.
That's great to hear from Emmeline, who has childbearing age. And so it's freeing. It's so liberating. It's so joyful. There's so many other ways to create. And I think that is part of the Aquarian possibilities. Like, gosh, we're so creative. There's so many ways to be really inspired. Anybody else? It's actually 2:00, so we've done our hour and a half already. That went really fast. Does anyone need to say something that we haven't touched upon?
Emily, my North Node is at 10 Libra, so it's really close to my North Node is very close to your ascendant, but that transit of Juno for me has really felt like a review of like, what does balance in relationship mean for me? And not so much the a little bit with children, because it's my 5th house, and how is my relationship balanced with my daughter, and but also with my own inner creativity, and am I giving enough energy to my creativity of not children, but just my creative projects and the things that I like to nurture. And it's always been a little bit of a tough road, because my sun is square, my nodal axis. So it's always, how does my consciousness and my vision of kind of myself, and kind of how does that interact with where I'm going? It's been a little bit of a rough road, but I think you're right, Lolita, with the future, there is so much openness and potential of the way it could be.
I also just wanted to add one last thing. When we've been talking about Neptune and Pisces, and for me, what really came through is that Neptune and Pisces doesn't want to define anything. It wants to let the mystery be. And with all this activity in Gemini, and Sag, there's the hunt for the ultimate truth, and it just can't be found. In that hunt will keep leading you down a million different breadcrumb trails, and that ultimately, it's like the square is between Venus and Neptune, is exploring how to let the mystery be, or how to live in that uncertainty, and with the illusion and the delusion and the bliss, the divine bliss, and not try to define it, even though everything, we want to define everything. And I don't know, sorry, that might have been a wrench in the whole conversation, but I just kept feeling the whole Neptune thing. I wanted to bring that in. And of course, that's in opposition to the moon in Virgo, and Virgo, of course, wants to categorize and to discern. And both processes are important, right? We've got to know when to discern and know when to hold the middle way in the mystery. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, maybe when we talk again, we'll talk about the nodes, and that totally wraps it up, Britt, beautifully, because we did a video on the truth trap. The truth trap is like, everyone's an expert. Everyone's going to be, you know, proposing their conspiracy version of what this is and so forth. And Al-Nalam is not going to allow this anymore, okay? Because Jupiter's truth thing is being drained completely, actually, by the first eclipse at the magnetic void in our galaxy, and all Jupiter's, you know, I'm going to get the highest possible truth, is going to be drained back into that feminine void of it's nothing. It's nothing. Just be in the mystery. It's nothing. Just be in the mystery. So that's beautiful. So why don't we wrap up there? Because this could go on forever. You feel it. Like we could really go on and on and on. Oh, this one's so great. But I'm going to try and load this. I got to go to the general store. It's even the club's EC fiber is down now. So that doesn't work for me. So hopefully I can load this because it's such a beauty. And I thank you all so much. I miss talking to you a lot. All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye. Thank you so much.